The rain in Manhattan didn't just fall. It felt like it was trying to wash away the sins of the city. Maya Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse, looking out at the skyline. At 32, she was the silent engine behind Vane and Associates. Her husband, Julian Vane, was the man who appeared on Architectural Digest, the man who shook hands with mayors. But every line, every structural calculation, every visionary curve of their buildings came from Maya's mind. She liked the shadows, or at least she told herself she did. Maya, darling, where is the final render for the zenith? Julian's voice boomed from the study. He walked in smelling of expensive bourbon and success. He looked at her not as a wife, but as a prized asset. It's on the server, Julian. It's my best work. An eco-skyscraper that breathes. It will change the world, Maya said softly. Julian smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. No, Maya, it will change my world. That night, while Julian slept, Maya's phone buzzed. An anonymous email. A single link to a hidden cloud drive. Curiosity, the trait that made her a great architect, became her undoing. She opened it. The drive contained documents, hundreds of them. Julian hadn't just been taking credit for her work. He had been using her digital signature to authorize illegal offshore transfers. He was laundering money for a shell company based in Panama. More horrifyingly, he had drafted a contingency plan if the authorities ever looked into the firm's finances. The trail led directly and exclusively to Maya Thorne. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Her husband hadn't just built a career on her talent. He had built a cage for her future. She moved to copy the files, her hands shaking. Suddenly, the lights in the penthouse flickered on. Julian stood at the doorway, his face no longer handsome, but a mask of cold calculation. I didn't want you to find that for another month. Maya, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. You're framing me, Julian. After everything I gave you. You gave me drawings, Maya. I gave you a life. But the project needs more capital. And the insurance on your accidental, professional downfall is worth more than your presence here. Before she could scream, the front door burst open. The FBI, they didn't go for Julian. They went for her. Julian had already placed the call. He had planted the physical evidence, a laptop with her fingerprints, and the offshore keys in her private safe. As the handcuffs tightened around her wrists, Julian leaned in and whispered, "The zenith will be my masterpiece. You'll just be a footnote in a cautionary tale about greed. Prison is a place where time either rots you or hardens you." For Maya, the first 6 months were a blur of tears and terror. She lost her name. She was now inmate 8829. She watched Julian on the flickering prison television. He had divorced her on the grounds of moral turpitude. He had married a 20-4-year-old heiress, Sophia Moretti, whose family brought him the political power he lacked. He was being hailed as the visionary of the decade. Maya sat in the library, staring at the gray walls, when an older woman sat across from her. Elena was serving 20 years for high-level white-collar crimes. "You have the eyes of a victim," Elena said, not unkindly. "In here, that's a death sentence. But you're an architect. You know how to build things. Why aren't you building a way out?" "He took everything," Maya whispered. "My license, my reputation, my life." "He took your identity," Elena corrected. "Which means you are now a ghost. And ghosts are the only things that can walk through walls." Under Elena's tutelage, Maya stopped being an architect of buildings and became an architect of ruin. She spent 3 years studying. She studied forensic accounting, the loopholes of international maritime law, and the psychology of ego. She exercised until her body was lean and strong. She cut her long hair into a sharp, jagged bob. She practiced a new accent, a new gait, a new way of looking at the world. She also learned Julian's weakness. Through smuggled business journals, she saw that the Zenith was over budget. To maintain his lifestyle, Julian was cutting corners. He was using grade B tempered glass instead of the reinforced solar polymer Maya had designed. The building has a flaw, Maya realized, tracing a diagram she had drawn from memory. In high winds, at that height, the glass will vibrate. It won't break immediately, but it will sing a song of collapse. When Maya was released on parole for good behavior after 3.5 years, she didn't go back to her old life. She didn't exist. She was Evelyn Reed, a consultant for high-risk asset management funded by a secret stash of cryptocurrency. Elena had helped her hide before her conviction. 6 months after her release, Julian Vane was under pressure. The Zenith was nearing completion, but the Moretti family, his in-laws, were getting nervous about the rising insurance premiums. They demanded an independent risk assessor. Enter Evelyn Reed. When Maya walked into the Vane and Associates boardroom, she wore a sharp charcoal suit and heavy-rimmed glasses. She moved with a cold, European efficiency. Julian was at the head of the table. He looked older, his skin sallow from stress. He looked at her. Maya's heart hammered against her ribs, but her face was a mask of ice. "Ms. Reed," Julian said, standing up, "I'm told you're the best at erasing problems. I don't erase problems." "Mr. Vane," Maya said, her voice an octave lower, polished with a subtle Swiss lilt, "I restructure them. Your building is a marvel, but your structural insurance is a mess. I'm here to ensure that when the ribbon is cut, nothing, not the law, and certainly not the physics, gets in your way." Julian was smitten not by her, but by the power she represented. He didn't recognize her. To him, Maya Thorne was a broken woman rotting in a halfway house. He couldn't imagine his victim standing in front of him, commanding the room. Over the next month, Maya became Julian's shadow. She worked from his office. She saw how he bullied his staff. She saw how he was gaslighting his new wife, Sophia. One evening, working late, Julian walked into her office. "You remind me of someone I once knew," he said, leaning over her desk. "Someone who had a spark of your genius, but lacked your discipline." "What happened to her?" Maya asked, her eyes fixed on the computer screen. "She thought she was my equal," Julian laughed. "She forgot that an architect is nothing without a builder. She's in the dirt now." "How tragic," Maya said. "But don't worry, Julian. I'm going to make sure you get exactly what you deserve for the Zenith." Maya's plan was twofold. First, she began helping Julian move his remaining personal wealth into a secure sovereign wealth fund to protect it from a potential and fake lawsuit she had manufactured via a series of shell companies. In reality, she was funneling his money into a trust for the families of construction workers who had been injured during his previous projects, workers he had refused to pay. Second, she sabotaged the building's grand opening. She didn't use bombs. She used the truth. The night of the grand opening was the social event of the century. The Zenith stood 110 stories tall, a needle of glass piercing the New York clouds. The elite, the politicians, and the media were all gathered in the Diamond Ballroom. On the 100th floor, Julian stood at the podium, basking in the flashbulbs. Sophia stood beside him, looking miserable. "Tonight," Julian announced, "we don't just open a building. We open a new chapter for humanity. The Zenith is unbreakable. It is my legacy." Maya stood in the back, holding a tablet. She hit a command. Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The promotional video on the giant LED screens cut to black. Then, a voice filled the room. It was Julian's voice recording from Maya's office weeks prior. "The glass is subpar, but the inspectors are in my pocket. If it cracks in 10 years, it's not my problem. I'll be retired in the Maldives by then with the Moretti money." The room went silent. Sophia Moretti turned to her husband, her face pale. Julian panicked. This is a prank, a deepfake. But Maya wasn't done. She walked toward the podium, removing her glasses. She caught Julian's eye. For the first time, he saw her. Really saw her. The blood drained from his face. "Maya!" He gasped, the name catching in his throat. "The Zenith is a beautiful design, Julian," Maya said, her voice amplified by the microphone. "But as you told me, it needs a foundation. And yours is built on sand." On the screens, documents began to scroll the original design files, the bank transfers, and the evidence of the frame-up from 4 years ago. Maya had spent months retrieving the deleted data from the firm's old server's data. Julian thought was gone forever. Then came the sound. A low, haunting hum started to vibrate through the floor. The wind outside had picked up. Because of the inferior glass Maya had flagged, the building began to sing. It was a terrifying, mournful sound. Panic erupted. The guests scrambled for the elevators. "You ruined me," Julian screamed, lunging at her. Maya didn't flinch. To security guards men, Maya had personally hired and brief-stepped in and pinned him down. "No, Julian," Maya whispered, leaning down to his ear. "I just finished the work you started. You built a house of cards. I just provided the wind." The Zenith was never occupied. It became a monument to corporate greed, eventually stripped and rebuilt by a new firm. Julian Vane was sentenced to 30 years for fraud, endangerment, and the original crimes he had pinned on Maya. The Moretti family, disgraced, stripped him of every cent. Maya Thorne stood on the deck of a small boat in the harbor, watching the sunrise hit the New York skyline. She was wealthy, thanks to the legal settlement that restored her assets. Her name had been cleared, but she didn't want the fame. She had a new firm now, based in a quiet corner of the world, designing homes for those who had nothing. She took her old wedding ring, the last piece of Julian. She owned and tossed it into the dark water. She wasn't the ghost of Julian Vane anymore. She was the architect of her own life. And for the first time in 4 years, the air she breathed felt clean.